All right. Welcome, everybody, to our Parrot Stars podcast. My name is Alexis Highland. I am the manager at Parrot Stars, and I am joined with Ashley and Avery, who also work with me at Parrot Stars. And today we wanted to do our very first introduction into nutrition. Again, this is just the beginning of our podcast. So we intend to have really detailed conversations in the future to kind of get into the specifics of certain elements of bird care. So when it comes to nutrition, it's a very big topic. There's a lot of elements to it. There's a lot of components that are very scientific and have a lot to do with how different nutrients and diets really affect the body. But today our goal is to just give you a good introduction to nutrition. So talk about what we do at Parrot Stars for the very large variety of parrots we have. And I think we're kind of a good example because we are working with babies that are still on supplemental hand feeding. We have babies that are weaning or newly weaned. We have kind of young adults, anywhere from 5 to 10 years old. And then we also work with our rescue parrots that can range anywhere from 1 year all the way up to 50 years. So we have a lot of parrots that we're trying to accommodate with our diet that we provide there at the store. So today we're just going to give you some basics. And of course, if you have questions about diet, we're more than happy to help. But then keep in mind, we'll get into more specifics over time.
Something I like that we do at the store for all of our birds, we do offer the fresh chopped vegetables and fruit for them daily. And we also include a huge variety. So we have some staple ingredients, but we do kind of shop with the seasons and try to offer them a lot of variety and just different flavors, textures, things like that. Because just like humans, we don't eat the same thing every day. So for the parrots, we try to offer enrichment when it comes to the types of veggies and fruit, as well as the textures, the colors that are in there too. It's always interesting to see what each particular bird ends up enjoying. So we never assume we know what their favorite likes or dislikes are going to be. And it's just a lot of fun for me, I guess, to prep the fresh diet for them and watch them really dive in and enjoy it.
Yeah. And you brought up just like the biggest point and the biggest distinction for how we feed at the store. So we have a kind of our vernacular at the store is that we have a fresh diet and then we have a dry diet. So what Ashley's speaking about is a major component of our fresh diet. So when we say fresh, we're referring to the chopped vegetables and fruit. And then we have a sprouted mix as well. And our sprouted mix is also very high variety, just like Ashley suggested. It's important to have a variety of vegetables and fruit. But our sprouted blend is highly dynamic, and it is literally that. We take different seeds and legumes and ancient grains, we soak them, and then we allow them to sprout. And with sprouting different seeds, legumes, ancient grains, it's releasing the nutrients from that densely packed dried seed or legume and making the nutrients a little bit easier for the body to absorb. So that, again, is a really advanced topic that we'll dive into. But when we're referring to sprouts, that is what we mean. And if you're just starting with introducing a fresh diet for your parrot and sprouts sound a little complex for you, don't worry. We can work with you on it. We can continue to provide coaching, but definitely try your very best to get the chop in there and the vegetables and fruit. That's going to get you started. And it's really important to present it as close to every day as possible.
I think another thing is like a lot of people kind of see it as like something you really have to, you know, like take time to implement, but it really can be a fun thing because I've obviously had fun with it with doing the fresh and seeing them like dive into the fresh when we do offer it every day. But honestly, just going to the grocery store and like picking out a couple extra things while you're getting your own stuff can be as simple as that, especially to start with. And so it doesn't have to be like a big commitment or anything that you have to worry about or anything like that. But it's always great to provide that dynamic, fresh diet like we were talking about for your parrot.
Totally. And Avery, you put a really good point in there that you don't have to overcomplicate it. The more simplistic you keep your fresh presentation for your bird, the more likely you as the human is going to be likely to offer it. So we tend to sometimes, not everybody, but a lot of us tend to procrastinate on projects. So don't think of your parrot's fresh diet as a project. Like Avery mentioned, each time you go to the grocery store, pick out 2 new vegetables, 2 new fruits for your bird to try, in addition to whatever vegetables or fruit your family normally eats. Now, again, at the store, we have the luxury of feeding a large amount of parrots. So we are able to buy a lot of ingredients once a week and use it up in that week's time before it has an opportunity to go bad. So we encourage people to offer variety kind of week to week. So the tricky thing with fresh food and with parrots in particular is if you make a ginormous batch of it and then freeze it, the texture, the flavor, and the quality is going to diminish slightly once you thaw it. So when we're talking about the fresh chop, the vegetables and fruit, ideally, not that you have to, if you want to freeze it, you can, but ideally, if you can make it fresh once a week and then try to use it up in that week's time, I think the likelihood of your parrot eating it is going to be slightly better.
I think too, something I hear from a lot of folks, if they're new to the fresh or it's new for their bird, is that my bird doesn't eat it. My bird doesn't like this fresh. So something that's really important when it comes to offering the fresh chop for your birds is to continue presenting it. When you bring home a new bird, I've heard sometimes people say, well, they're not having it anymore, but you told me they were at the store. Big transitions, sometimes very normal for the bird to not engage with their food the way they do when they're fully comfortable and settled in. I always encourage folks continue presenting it. Once they settle, or if it's totally new to them, once they get acclimated, they're going to love it. And the benefits are just amazing for them physically and mentally. Something I really appreciate that we do is even with our babies, when they're hand feeding and not quite eating solids yet, we still present it. It's still in the cage, even if they don't touch it. So it's not this big foreign entity once they are old enough to actually eat it. So whenever I hear that question, I always encourage folks, keep presenting it, keep doing it. Once they get comfortable and acclimated, they're going to be so happy that they have access to it.
Absolutely. And yes, we do offer the fresh food for our birds specifically. And I think a lot of breeders are starting to do this more frequently. We're trying to present that fresh food as the first food available to a weaning baby. So sometimes we will present, or breeders or hand feeders will present dry food first. And there are benefits to doing that, but we try when their babies are just starting to show curiosity and they're starting to use their beaks and they're exploring different textures inside the cage. We want that to kind of capitalize on that exploration and get that fresh food in there as quickly as possible. And yes, it's so important to be consistent. So even though we present the fresh food essentially every single day from the day that a parrot can start eating it, all the way up until it goes home, we really want to encourage people to continue on that. And then for those of you that have already had your parrot for a long time, and maybe you've tried it several times with no success, you've offered fresh food and the bird is just simply not eating it. A little trick or technique, or I guess a question that I often ask when I hear that comment from customers or people that have their parrots for a long time and they're just not getting them to eat the fresh, I often ask, well, does your parrot like to eat your people food? And very often the answer is yes. It's often because parrots are incredibly social animals, and often they enjoy the interaction they're having with you, and offering a piece of human food often is like a type of treat, and the parrot is seeing it as a sign of positive reinforcement and a sign of interaction and attention from their companion human. So when you're introducing fresh and the chopped fruit, vegetables and fruit particularly, you have to kind of work at it. It's not something that's a passive gesture where you're just like putting a dish in the bottom of the cage or in the little dish holder and then walking away. What I'll encourage people to do is pretend to eat the vegetables in the dish before you put it in the cage. Like, be excited. Be an actor when you're doing it. So have a smile on your face, look excited, show a lot of interest in the dish, and often that will make the dish, one, a little less intimidating to the bird, but also more enticing because you're showing interest in it. It'll push the bird to show a little interest in it as well. So it's a great strategy to try to get your parrot to try things that they're not typically interested in, and to make it a good way to engage with your parrot and offer it some socialization at the same time.
True. Building that relationship would be a part of that, which is a lot of fun, which is the whole name of the game, I guess.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so something else that I really enjoy that we do for our parrots at the store, I also do it for my bird at home. When we're prepping that fresh diet, we also sprinkle a little of our Over the Moon blend on top of it. And if you're unfamiliar with it, it is a little blend of chia seed, flaxseed, bee pollen, coconut powder, bunch of goodies, and it just offers a lot of different texture for them. It also is something that just is a form of dietary enrichment. So, you know, maybe not necessarily every day. I personally do it every day because my bird loves it, but it's just a nice way to also enhance that fresh diet for them too. Or if they're kind of new to the fresh, it's a good way to kind of get them excited to go for it, because those tend to be dietary things that the parrots really do enjoy and kind of get excited about.
Yeah, and I think with the Over the Moon, that's a textural thing. So it's something that we make at the store and we sell it, and we use it daily for our birds, and particularly small birds, but also our big birds, because we offer it in our finch and canary cage all the way up to our hyacinth cage. So it's used for every size parrot, even though when you look at the bag, it looks like a lot of really tiny ingredients. It's all a lot of really nutritious superfoods, and the textural component is what's really important. So we don't encourage people, I mean, you can sprinkle it in dry food, but it's intended to be mixed with the fresh food because it kind of clings to anything kind of moist or damp. And as the parrot's in playing with it or starting to eat it, there's that little crunch and grind of the hemp seed and the chia and the different ingredients in there. So it offers a little bit of the textural satisfaction and gratification that a parrot's often looking for when they're eating. So it's a great way to kind of, again, entice them, but without sprinkling full-blown seeds or pellets on the fresh food, where the parrot might just pick through those couple of dry, familiar things and show less motivation in the fresh food.
Yeah, I think another thing we do is it's called Bountiful Garden. I kind of call it like the sister product of the Over the Moon, but it's mostly like flower petals and herbs and pollens and stuff like that, which is really cool, and it smells fantastic. So I always have everybody smell it before they buy it, and then that's kind of the selling point.
I do the exact same thing too. I'm like, smell it.
No, it does smell. It smells a little bit like potpourri, but that's fine. But a good thing to do with it is to also put it on the fresh, because it will do that kind of clinging, and it's in more bright colors that really catches their eye. But some people actually, and I learned this when I started, is you can sprinkle it in the water too, and it'll change the water different color, almost make like a little tea like that, which I think is a lot of fun.
If at any points during this podcast you hear what sounds like a crying dog, that is exactly what you're hearing. It is my little 15-year-old Chihuahua. So we're trying to keep him quiet. But if you hear that in the background and we can't quite edit it out, that's what that noise is. So, okay. So Avery, so back to the Bountiful Garden.
But it's just another one of those great products. It's a supplement, and it really is intriguing to your bird. And it's also a textural thing as well, because it adds that different kind of contrast to the over the moon. But it's just one of those things where it's like icing on the cake on top of their original fresh that should always be available.
Yeah. And I think like for Lucky, who's behind me, and I always forget to introduce my little companion parrots we have in the background of our podcast. So I have two blue-headed Pionis. Both are rescues. Both are what we believe is over 30 years old. Lucky, we know for certain because the owners had him from a baby and they surrendered him about a year ago, and he was 31 when they surrendered him. And then with Jack, I've had him for 15 years, and whoever surrendered him to the rescue said that he was at least 15 years old. So that's where we're getting our ballpark. But anyway, with Lucky's definitely a better eater than Jack is. Jack is a good fresh eater, but like Lucky will annihilate his fresh dish. And so what I do for my two birds is I take the Over the Moon and a Bountiful Garden and I mix them together in a little plastic Tupperware. And then when I mix together their vegetables, their fruit, and their sprouts, I take just like a heaping pinch of the Over the Moon and the Bountiful mixed together, and I just stick it right on top of their dish. And it's really cute because like Lucky is like notorious for having like a really messy face after he's eaten his fresh food. So Jack is like my very clean and pristine eater. When I clean his cage, like it's like the same poop spot every time. And like he has got just a little bit of like fresh food from where he wipes his beak off. Lucky looks like he's just like thrown everything everywhere. So he's kind of my messy eater. But it's kind of nice because he does that, I can see that he's eating just about everything I'm offering. And just like you mentioned, Ashley, a little bit ago, when I first brought him home, he was a little shell-shocked and he was like adjusting to the transition. He had been in the same home his whole life, and now we're trying to get him used to his cage and used to the other birds and the dogs and all this stuff. And so he did not touch his fresh food for like literally almost a month. But I was really consistent. I made sure that I kept offering it. Just like I mentioned, I was playing the game of like pretending to eat it. I was trying to offer him a couple pieces from the hand, like in a treat-like fashion. And eventually, once he kind of started to put his guard down, he showed interest in it. So you can't get discouraged. Even if you're 30 days in with no avail, like you really need to be consistent and try your best to offer it as much as you can. And you should hopefully see results over time.
Even with my little green cheek, she loves fresh. And she was one of the few that even on day one of bringing her home, she was like, oh my gosh, fresh, I'm going for it. Still to this day, every morning when I present it to her, I will physically tilt the bowl and show her before I put it in. And I'm like, wow, what do I have? Good morning, Nixie. And it's still like an exciting thing, even though she did kind of go for it right from the get-go. And it's kind of just become a fun little morning routine. And she's just so enthusiastic about it. So even if they're eating it, you could still kind of simulate what that should look like and still just make it an exciting thing, because that level of excitement, that energy is a little bit contagious, and it just kind of makes it a little more fun for them as well. You mentioned it being also a social thing because they are social learners. So if you are able to, make it exciting and really engage with them while you're presenting it, that can be another way to help them either get acclimated to that fresh presence or to just make that routine a little bit more exciting for them.
I think something we didn't touch on, especially for the fresh, is so obviously there's a dry diet component that should be pretty accessible at all times. But for fresh, make sure that, especially if you're just getting started, that you are taking it out, regularly at the end of the day after they've had their fill or fun with it. Because obviously when I say it out loud, but sometimes it's one of those things that I can easily forget about or overlook, is because it gets nasty. You don't want your parrot to eat nasty stuff. We don't want to eat nasty stuff. So
and at the end of the day at the store too, we go through and we'll pull the fresh dishes from the birds, washed it really well. And like you said, after being out during the day, we don't want it to get funky. We don't want potentially fruit flies or anything like that. So just being mindful that you don't leave it overnight. It's not the worst thing in the world, but that's really smart to mention as well.
Yeah. And I think what you're also highlighting is like at our store, we're removing it like late afternoon, early evening at the latest. And functionally, like we get there in the morning, we feed before we open. But it's super important to keep in mind that birds in the wild, and especially parrots, they are morning foragers. So they're basically up and out at or before dawn, and they're eating a lot first thing in the morning. So parrots have incredibly fast metabolisms. We know that they must eat consistently throughout the duration of the entire day. They don't eat overnight, but they're hungriest and they eat the most first thing in the morning. So another kind of tip or suggestion is when you're introducing that fresh food, try your very best to like literally wake up, get over to the fridge and try to get that fresh food in the cage as early as possible. And the reason we're doing that is because like Avery mentioned, you have to have the dry food basically accessible 24/7 to some degree. So if we're kind of delaying the time frame that the fresh is offered, you might miss that window where your parrot's real hungry and might be motivated to eat the fresh. It's not available, so they're eating their dry food instead. Time of day is really important. Now, again, we try not to guilt people or pressure you. Still, whatever your schedule is, if you can get fresh in there at any point of the day, that's going to be preferred over not offering it. So if you have a really limited schedule, or if you have a family with young kids, or whatever the circumstances that just makes it physically impossible for you to get it in there immediately after you wake up, it's okay. Still try your best to get it in there at some point during the day. Something is better than nothing. And we're not trying to like say or claim that we're the best bird people out there, but I think you would see results that if you offered it first thing in the morning, the motivation for your parrot to investigate it would be much greater.
So of course, time of day is important, but also like what we were kind of talking about earlier and what we've been touching on is just the visual aspect as well. We want those bright colors just to really catch that attention, and all those greens and, you know, the blues and reds and stuff like that you'll find in the fresh. But mentioning the greens, it's always important, especially if you do have young kids at home, to always, you know, eat the veggies, you know, first. But of course, veggies, a higher ratio of veggies to fruit would probably be preferred, you know, because, you know, it's a pretty common fact that fruits are high in sugar. So it's just good to be pretty moderate about that, you know. Mm-hmm. But they're still important. They're still an important aspect of that diet. And when you are buying and you are getting that higher ratio of veggies, to just kind of keep an eye on, you know, either organic or inorganic, of course, because, you know, organic will not have those chemicals that could potentially, you know, arise in some of those other types of fruits and veggies. And then buying with the season and things like that. So they're just as fresh as possible, you know, and we just want the best products for our parrots in general, really.
For sure. And I think you mentioned something too, like if organic veggies and fruits are maybe not within your budget, totally fine. Just making sure that we're really washing thoroughly those fruits and veggies. You know, just of course to keep the birds as healthy and safe as possible.
Definitely.
I know I do a little extra washing of my veggies when it's things that physically grow in the ground, like a carrot or something like that. Again, just to make sure that everything's really, really clean and we're offering the best possible thing for our birds.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know like at our store, because we're making such a huge volume of chop every week, and because we have high stakes, I mean, we're feeding this fresh food to a lot of birds. We're really adamant about the washing part. So a really great way to break down some of the buildup that's on the outside of the vegetables and fruit, but then also to kind of reduce any kind of chemicals that might be on the outside of the vegetables and fruit is to do a veggie wash in apple cider vinegar and water. So when we say that, we're talking about apple cider vinegar of the mother. So not necessarily the cooking apple cider vinegar. You're looking for the cloudy apple cider vinegar, completely bird safe, but it's going to add a little bit of like zhuzh to your water wash, and it'll help kind of agitate and break down some of the residues that might accumulate on the outside of vegetables and fruit from when they're just harvesting them to you actually putting it in the bird cage, because it gets exposed to a lot of different bacteria, chemicals, however it might get produced. And then also something to consider, some vegetables and fruit are sourced from other countries and their protocols might be different. So we know at the very least, birds are more sensitive to those things than humans are. So whatever extra steps you can take to make sure your fresh is as safe as possible is going to be to your bird's benefit.
Something that's really nice too, we give it a good rinse after the apple cider vinegar. It really doesn't change the smell, composition, flavor, any of that. It just simply cleans it a little bit better than if we had only rinsed it with water.
Right.
Yep. So I think that's like a really great conversation about just like the bare bones, basic talk about fresh food. But as we've mentioned, that dry component is really important as well. So again, at Parrot Stars, getting used to the terminology that we use among our own little individual households and our own little personal flocks. But then I think all of our staff kind of uses the same terms, both with our customers at our store and at home. But when we're talking about the dry food, we're specifically referring to like the dry diet that's like the food available to the bird all day long. Now, there's other dry foods that can be offered, foraging treats, training rewards. But when we're saying the dry food, it is for us a high variety seed blend mixed with a naturally colored pellet. Now, this conversation, again, is simply meant to be an introduction, and we want to talk about nutrition because it's a huge part of parrot companionship, and we don't want to push it off to a later episode because we know that it's going to be something that a lot of you have questions about. So we're very aware that in our North American, but also around the world, like our little bird world community of captive parrots. Oh, there go my parrotlets. I also have 2 little parrotlets at home. So if you hear them chirping in the background, it's also because like the sun is just hitting their cage. So, but that's that noise in the background. So we understand that the dry food is highly controversial. There are a lot of opinions, both from veterinarians, from animal biologists, from avian nutritionists, to just like the pet owners about what the quote unquote best bird diet is for parrots in captivity. And I think there is a lot of advantages to having a pelleted diet, but I also think there's a lot of advantages to having a seed diet. And without going too deep into it, because I really think this is a topic that deserves an entire episode. But again, just to give a little bit of understanding of why we do what we do, is that seeds do offer a little bit of that natural gratification, and there is a fat element to them. And I know a lot of people get nervous when they hear about the fat content in seeds and nuts because they instantly link it to fatty liver disease. And I just want to make sure we're being really clear. We'll talk about that in the future, what some of the pro and cons to offering seed are and the potential risks to offering seeds. But when we're talking about the seed blend that we do at Parrot Stars, it's a seed blend that we make in-house. We really pride ourselves in it. It's something that we worked on for literally years, kind of coming up with the ratios, working with a U.S. farmer to make sure we're getting really quality, low-fat seeds. It's very dynamic. So if you're very anti-seed blends, I just want to be very clear that the seed blend that we're talking about, that we're offering, is not just the run-of-the-mill, without saying names of companies, like your very like big mainstream pet store food brands that are all millet or all sunflower seeds. Like our seed blend that we're encouraging people to consider is very diverse. It has a lot of different seed ingredients. It also has a lot of human grade dried vegetables and fruit. It has natural flowers in it. So it's highly dynamic. The other piece of that, sorry, I promise I'll let you guys talk, but I just want to make sure we're really covering the important parts of why we do what we do. When we're talking about the pelleted diet, again, highly controversial. Some people are very anti-pellet because it's processed. Some people are very pro-pelleted diet because it's formulated and it's low in fat. So when we're talking about the pellet that we're offering, we're picking brands of pellet that are naturally colored and that are very parrot-specific companies. They've done their research. They've spent a lot of time figuring out what is bird safe, what the parrots are going to be really interested and invested in trying. And we're offering a variety of different brands of pellet to try to encourage them to eat a variety, but then also so we're not just fixing the parrot onto one particular type of pellet where they're not going to show interest in other food types. So that's kind of our basic, very quick intro of why we do what we do with our dry food. So if you're hearing anything that as a listener you're thinking is kind of a red flag or is very different than what you do at home, kind of stay a little bit open-minded for us. And then keep in mind, we're very open to conversation. So if you have questions, you can put them out there. But we'll deep dive into the reasons we do the dry diet we do in future episodes.
I also want to touch on something you mentioned about naturally colored pellets. That's something really important. So if you're unsure when you're picking out a given pellet for your bird, in general, if it's starting to kind of look like Fruit Loops, maybe steer clear of that. Those tend to have some food dyes, potentially added sugars in it. And that natural coloring element is a really good component to look for when you are picking a pelleted diet for your bird. Oftentimes, those naturally colored pellets have color that comes simply from the fruits and veggies that are in it. And that can just be a good way to inform decision-making when you are selecting a pellet for your bird. And don't forget that you can read the ingredients on the back just like you would for human food. And that can be really useful too, because then you can kind of see what your parrot's getting. You can see if there's things added that maybe necessarily aren't appropriate or have preservatives or things that, you don't necessarily feel comfortable giving to your bird. So you can make a really well-informed decision by appearance, but also by kind of looking at those ingredients on there. There are some pellets out there that are really simple and have maybe 4 or 5 ingredients in them, some that have a bit more variety, but you can kind of look at that and make sure you're picking things that do balance the diet for your bird overall.
I think the name of the game with it really is, and it's important to reiterate that we're not trying to say that, what we give is, the best option, but we have spent a lot of time on it. And the main idea is just providing as whole 100% as close as possible to that and dynamic as possible of a diet, even on top of all the fresh, which is a whole nother world that we've introduced earlier in the episode. But just keeping kind of providing as much nutrients as possible is what we're kind of all about with the dry diet. So again, what we're doing is the solution, or what you're doing at home might be, what you feel comfortable with and what your bird is thriving on. And that's totally cool too. But I think it's just important to kind of expand the boundaries, a little bit and keep things spicy, if you will, with your bird's diet.
Yeah, absolutely. So exactly that's a great way to summarize it. We're looking at offering our companion parrots like the highest variety we can manage. So obviously the fresh vegetables and fruit and sprouts are going to be one huge element of that. And then within the dry food, offering as much variety with the dry ingredients as you can manage is really, really going to help. And then everything in moderation, I think, is a good little piece to add to that. So we want everything to kind of be a nice ratio. So when we're talking about our dry food having a pelleted and seed component, the seed is in moderation. The different brands of pellet are in moderation. We're trying to create a dish that is very dynamic looking. And that is because we don't want the bird to have only those couple of ingredients where they can just kind of pick out their favorites and kind of get fixated on those favorites. But then by having everything in moderation and not going really heavy into just one dry ingredient, you're going to ideally increase the chance that your parrot's going to be really, really healthy. And I mean, with humans, we kind of know that, and it's a conversation that's often had that obviously the less processed food we eat, typically the healthier we are. And obviously budget's going to be a component of that. And we can offer continued coaching on how to affordably feed your bird the healthiest way possible. But when you're looking at processed foods, again, picking out brands that are really reputable, really great quality pelleted brands are going to really help in that area. And then obviously with your seed blends, you want to pick out the high variety so that you're kind of forcing your bird's body to constantly be breaking down and digesting new things. So it's not the same thing day in and day out. And that's really what becomes problematic over time, is when the bird's eating a really stagnant, similar diet all day, every day, years after years, which we see. I mean, that's the reality of bird ownership. There are birds that have been eating the same food all day, every day for years on end. So we're just trying to take some of the pressure off of their body of eating and digesting the same ingredients. The more diversity there is, the healthier they're going to be. I think mentally and physically. I think, like you mentioned, Avery, the visual stimulation is something to consider also, because in the wild, I mean, it's incredibly visually stimulating. They have stimulus coming at them from every single direction, and they get that gratification of foraging and finding their food item. And so by offering a little bit of variety week to week with the colors and the textures and the fresh food, and then with the dry food, offering different brands of pellet where there's going to be different textural variation and color variation. And then with the high variety seed blend, that's multiple different types of seeds and vegetables and fruit and flowers. I mean, you're just trying to get your bird exposed to as many food choices as you can manage, and hopefully increase the chance that they're going to stay really healthy for a very long time.
I think like maybe a general question, because again, I mean, I haven't been in the parrot world for overly too long, so I guess it's a genuine thing to ask. I'm curious about if it is safe to say it this way to maybe simplify the why we do the seed and pellet. Would it be safe to say that like the seed would be maybe the good fat and sustenance, and the pellet would be like the vitamins and nutrients?
So it's a great question. And again, I think that's an area that we can really deep dive into. But most pelleted diets are going to be carefully constructed with the vitamin and the nutrient profile. They're going to add the minerals. Now, it depends on the pellet brand. So as Ashley mentioned, like, you can be a conscientious buyer and really read the labeling and the packaging to see whether or not that pellet company is claiming that that could be more or less a standalone diet for the bird. If it is, that means that they've really put the efforts in, like with dog food, to make sure it has adequate protein content, vitamins, all the different minerals that a parrot could need. Now, the other piece of what you're mentioning that I think is important to remind people of is we also are going to encourage the seed blend because it has the fat and the calories, because we're also encouraging people to allow their parrots to be fully flighted. And I think that's something that we should also kind of touch on for this introduction to nutrition conversation, is that, like humans, parrots are going to have very diverse levels of exercise they might do in different households or different ages. So a young parrot, we're going to hopefully not clip its wings, allow it to be fully flighted, have a large enclosure, have a very dynamic day where they're moving around a lot, flying, burning off far more calories than maybe a parrot. And again, we're not trying to offer judgment or criticism, but we have to be realistic that there are parrots in captivity in people's homes that live maybe in too small of an enclosure or aren't getting basically any physical activity in the course of a day. So their ability to burn off the extra calories and fat is going to vary. So we're trying again to accommodate all of those different birds at our store. We're trying to, when we're selling a bird or we're coaching a bird owner, we're trying to look at like, okay, the ideal lifestyle for a bird is going to be highly active, lots of exercise, ideally flight as well. They can accommodate and burn off those calories faster and better than a bird that might be like really old and arthritic or just not have that ability to get out and exercise. So the fat and the calories of the seed, might have more effect on them. So,
yeah. All right. So maybe my question pertained to kind of our store situations, which is why we do what we do.
Exactly.
Okay.
I like that you mentioned age as well, because there are options too for maybe a weaning mix when they're very young. There's ones for, they're juvenile to midlife. And then there's also diets for when they're a little bit older. So depending on your parrot's age and what their physical needs are, you might be looking at different pelleted options that are going to support what their body needs at those given life stages. So that's just another way that you can enrich their dry diet. That's something that we kind of focus on too at the store. We specifically have our weaning mix for our very young babies. And then we have our mix for our, juvenile to midlife parrots too. And they're slightly different, offering things and ingredients that are going to be a little more important when they're just weaned, and things that are a little more important when they're, in that juvenile stage. So you might find that throughout your parrot's life, you are looking at a different type of pellet for them, and that's totally okay. And in some instances recommended depending on what age the bird is.
So I think we've kind of launched into it. Hopefully we can continue the conversation over time and really deep dive into what that fresh food is actually doing for the parrot's mind and body. Same thing for the dry. And then how you use the fresh food and the dry food, again, in moderation or throughout the day to motivate or discourage good extra treats or not so good extra treats. So if we're very focused on eating human food, we can coach you on that. Again, we want to make sure we're not going to go into it too much today because we want to keep it focused on just an intro. But there's all the foraging treats, the training treats, and those are all things that are going to have to be considered when you're thinking about your dry food and your fresh food as well. So again, just a quick recap of our conversation today. We're going to always encourage people to offer as much variety in their parrot's diet as possible. The way we talk about it is we break it down into two categories, their fresh food and their dry food. The fresh food is a combination of a chop, which is our vegetables and fruit, mixed with our sprouts, which are going to be soaked and sprouted, seeds, legumes, and ancient grains. Ideally, your fresh food is offered in the morning when the bird is hungriest and eats the most, removed midday to prevent any risk of exposure to spoilage or harmful bacteria. And then our dry food is going to be a combination of naturally colored pellets, ideally a couple different brands if possible, mixed with a high variety seed blend. Again, we do our Nature's Enrichment high variety seed blend. We make it in store. It's really, really high variety. And we make a mix that's based on the size of the parrot as well. Those two things are mixed together in the same dish, offered separately from the fresh food, and have to be offered all day long. Because they have a fast metabolism, they need to eat all day long. So if you have questions about how to best get your bird started on new food items, feel free to reach out. Follow, like, or subscribe to this podcast if you want to learn more, because we're going to really be trying to cover so many different topics, but nutrition is a huge one that we're going to continue to have a conversation about. So again, the best thing you can do for our little podcast here is to share it, rate, review it, like it, subscribe to it, anything you guys can do to kind of help boost our podcast. The more you do for us, the more people we are going to reach, the bigger audience we'll be able to achieve. And then the more we'll be able to kind of contribute to making this podcast. So thank you very much, Avery and Ashley, for coming out and doing this podcast outside of work hours. I might mention, I should probably shout that out to our listeners that we're really trying to get the word out there and we're really working hard on this little thing. So, all right. Thank you guys so much for joining us. And we really look forward to our future episodes.
As always, everybody, be kind to your parrot and it'll be kind to you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.